If you're here, relax, go get something to drink, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. Thanks, bye-bye. Hi everybody, I'm Maria Spitalnik with StashBlaster Quilts, and I am here to help you be able to sew quilts more quickly with less stress. We certainly all have enough stress in our lives. I am by trade a professional organizer, so as usual I'm going to start today with an organizational tip. Actually, it's more of a concept this time, and then after that I'm going to be asking you for some input, and then after that it's going to be just kind of sew along with me, relax, that kind of a thing. I want this venue to be very welcome and open. You're welcome to put in chats. I've got the chat screen up so I can see it if anybody has anything that they want to say. You can also send me emails or go to my website and leave me messages there about things you'd like to know about. It's also very common that I'll do a quilter type organizational tip at the beginning, and then later on I might give something a little bit more general. So that's what this is for today. Just as an FYI, I am scheduled to do this again in 2 weeks because I do the first and third Wednesday of every month. This time, however, I'm going to be in San Diego, and I am going to be 4 hours behind, so I am not going to be doing our stream next time. So just be prepared. This is the first one that I'm missing, but I will see you the first Wednesday in December. Okay, so our tip for this session is about working with other people. Now, this is not how to get along with your coworkers. This is about how to work with other people in becoming more organized. So for some people that might mean having a friend with you to help you go through your closet and figure out what looks good with what you're going to keep, etc. For some, it's that motivation of knowing that somebody's coming over, so you have to do it. You can't just decide to do something else. Because to be honest, for everyone, including me, and I do this for a living, organization type work always hits the bottom of the to-do list. I would much prefer to go to lunch with my friends. I'd rather read a book. I'd rather do almost anything than have to dig into an organizational project sometimes. It's 100% normal and natural, but sometimes it has to get done. Now, for some of my clients, they really don't have a choice, and they have to do it whether they're in the mood or not. And so I go in and I try to do my part and make it as easy on them as possible. For some people, they don't want to hire a professional, and that's fine, but they still need that help. So I have a lot of my quilter friends that what they'll do is say, okay, I'll tell you what. You come and help me this Saturday at my sewing room, and then I'll help you in your sewing room next Saturday. That's perfectly valid. There's no reason why you can't do that. There is one rule that you always have to remember, though. If you are the guest, you are not allowed to talk them into keeping things. If they decide to get rid of something, you're not allowed to say, oh, but that would go so well with these other things over here, or you could just get a little pair of leggings or something and that would look great. If a person has decided to let things go, you have to let them go. So that's the one rule when you're helping somebody. Sewing room, trying on their clothes, going through their paperwork, whatever it is. Now, paperwork does have a small caveat to that rule, and that is if they don't know what to keep and you are not an expert, then suggest that they hire someone who is. Because it's very possible that you could be encouraging them to throw something away that they will need for taxes. And just because you don't need it for your situation, their situation is different. So for example, an attorney has to keep paperwork differently than a therapist does. So that's also different than an accountant, which is also different from an entrepreneur. So every single person, based on their industry, may have different rules for whether they need to keep it on paper. Are they allowed to keep it digitally? What is their situation? So unless you really, really, really know your stuff, make sure that you suggest that they hire a professional to at least tell them. Do a consult. A lot of pros will do it for free. a quick little 30-minute consult. And yes, they're trying to get your business. Don't get me wrong, that's why they're doing it. But you can talk to them about which are the important documents to keep. So there are some general rules of thumb, but again, hire a professional. That's not even me. Okay, if it's something that I'm not 100% sure on, I will always recommend that we err on the side of caution and that they talk to their attorney, their bookkeeper, whoever it is that they have that knows their industry and what their rules are. So let's put that caveat into place. But for most things, if somebody's going through their kitchen or their sewing room or whatever, there's no legal ramifications. Nobody's going to go to jail because they got rid of a ruler they might have better off keeping. Wow, that wasn't even English. They might have been better off keeping. So that's where we're going to go from there. So what happens if you're helping someone? And let's say it's a family member. Always the hardest. It's always the hardest to work with a family member. And one of the reasons for that is because you have a history. So with my mother, when she was alive, I could look at her, not even have anything in my head that was wrong, but she would read into it the history of what I was like as a teenager. And she would get all upset because I had set off something in her head that was unintended, that has an emotional baggage attached to it. So it's always harder with family members. It's not that it can't be done, but it's always harder. Number one, with family in particular, he has his stuff, she has her stuff. You are not allowed to throw out the other person's stuff. That's their job. That can be really hard to do, but if you throw something out that belongs to someone else, what that does to the trust in your relationship is an amazing thing. You can have 30 years of getting along just fine, but without their permission, you threw out something that to you was stupid. Let's say Superman comics, issues 1 through 20. You get the idea, right? They're gonna go ballistic. They're gonna go completely bonkaroo on you. So, first of all, because of the financial side in that particular case. But even if it's not something like that, even if it's something that you really believe is trash, it's still their decision. I did have this one client where I went to her home and we were working on a secretary. That's one of those little teeny tiny desks that has that angular front on it that folds down into the desk. And there was this piece of paper in there that had obviously been wadded up and folded a few times. It was horribly dirty. It was almost impossible to read. There were these brown stains on it. Obviously trash, right? No. When I asked her about it, she said, you know what? If this house was burning down, I would worry more about saving this than saving my family. Well, that got my attention. I said, okay, can you tell me more about it? This was a love letter that her grandfather had been writing to her grandmother when he was shot and killed overseas. Those brown marks were his blood. His friend, while running away, snatched the piece of paper, stuffed it in his pockets, and ran for all he was worth, and then mailed it to her later. So it meant nothing to me, but it meant a lot to her. Now, this is this woman's grandmother, but even so, the family history involved in that was amazing. So never make an assumption. Now, if my husband and I were moving, he's a computer guy. Okay, so he's got computer parts all over his office. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, it's all trash. Those of you who have watched me before know that technology and I just don't get along. He mistakenly is of the opinion that I have way too much fabric and junk up here in my sewing room, and that at least 90% of it could go away. Now, he's wrong. He's just wrong. He's totally wrong. It's his job to be wrong. He's my husband. But if we were to be moving, he would have to go through his computer stuff and decide what truly was worth moving. And I would have to go through my sewing stuff and decide what's truly worth moving, given the space we would be moving into. Now, if I won the lottery for $500 million tomorrow, and if I were moving, it would be upsizing, not downsizing. So you know I would have a studio 5 times this size, with amazing lighting and the top-of-the-line machines and all of that stuff. That's not going to happen to very many of us. Most of us will be downsizing. So he has less space, less of a footprint here in the house than I do. Fabric is big and bulky. The entire wall behind me here is fabric folded that's at least 1/4 of a yard. My stuff that's smaller than that's on the wall behind where my camera is. I've got a ton, okay? I think it's almost 15 feet floor to ceiling of fabric, okay? Because I get given a lot of fabric, which is part of it because I make a lot of charity quilts. And I'm a scrap quilter, so people, when they're done with their projects, if they don't want a scrap quilt, I'm often gifted with fabric. So there's a ton of fabric here. And I turn it over in about, usually somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, depending on how busy my organizing business is, which means that right now I'm not really getting rid of much of anything. For some reason, this has been an incredibly busy 6 months for me. But normally, within 2 years, I'll have turned over all of this fabric, and we'll have replaced it with other stuff. And so I'm so grateful that people give it to me, because I couldn't make as many quilts as I do if I had to buy all the fabric, off the bolt. But anyway, so if we were moving, my stuff is big and bulky. It's not as costly per pound or per cubic foot or whatever as his stuff is, but it is bulky. So I would have to downsize a larger percentage of my things than he would have to do his, which means nobody can do it better than I can, because I would know which fabrics are older, which ones are in colors I'd prefer not to work in, which ones I already have plans for. If I knew far enough in advance I was downsizing, I would just sew it all up, because then I would just start with all new fabric in the new place. So there's lots of different ways to tackle it. But do I have specialty rulers? You betcha. I love specialty rulers. I know I don't need them. I know I could do the same quilts just as well without them, but I can do them faster and be more efficient, which is one of those things that, with how little time I have to sew, makes it imperative that I be efficient. But like I've said on this channel before in the past, all those Baltimore album quilts from back in the day, all those other quilts that we ooh and ah over from the 16, 17, 1800s, they were all done with a needle, thread, and fabric. At most, they made a template, whether they cut it out of paper or another scrap of fabric or out of wood. I've actually seen wooden templates. I thought that was the coolest thing. Then we moved on to things like cereal box templates. Nothing wrong with that. Do you need all the specialty stuff? No. So someday I am going to pare down on my specialty rulers. I'm going to have to, because of size. Or because of physical ability. I might not be able to use all the teeny little tiny templates that I have for things, because I do a lot of small piece quilting. If you know me at all from quilt guilds and stuff, people will see me doing paper piecing with 3/8 inch hexagons and stuff like that. I mean, it's completely insane, and I get that. But it is somewhat who I am. So keep in mind, they do theirs, you do yours, and then the two of you negotiate the middle. Now, let's say you're done. You're done. He's not done. he needs help, or we're not going to make the deadline. There's basically 4 stages when you're working through a downsize with someone. And you may not hit them all in this order. Most people don't. Most people ping pong between things. So the first stage is what I call the cheerleader phase. That's when the whole, hey honey, let's get on this. I brought down some boxes. I'll help you sort. If you don't want my help actually touching things, then I'll read a book. I will make sure that I answer the phone calls, and I'll make dinner, and I'll do these other things because we're a team. We're going to get this done. I'm on your side. Yay! Okay, you don't have to do the whole yay thing, but, The second phase is disappointment. Honey, I thought you were going to get this done today. You told me that you were going to spend all day Saturday and you were going to work on this. And you're not done. In fact, I can't even tell that you did anything today. I love you and we're a team. I will do whatever it takes. We'll do this again next weekend, okay? I'm here for you because we're a team. So that's your disappointment phase. Then you hit the irritated phase. We're moving in 3 weeks. I don't have time for this. I've got the rest of the house to deal with. And you're lollygagging down here trying to put these 2 little things together and find the end of this pen and checking to make sure all the pen's right. None of that's important. You've got to get this done. Stage 4. I'm done. I'm not helping you anymore because you don't respect me. You don't respect my time. I don't even know why I'm bothering about this. Get your own darn dinner. I'm going out. I'm going to spend some time with my friends because at least they appreciate me. And if you decide that you're moving with me, fine. And if not, I don't care anymore. Now, is that last one a little extreme? Yes. But I will tell you, a lot of my clients, their kids have washed their hands of them. They're not going to come over and help anymore. And it can be something just as simple as, I've tried to help before. It always backslides. I don't feel appreciated. I'm done. It's as simple as that. Now, of course, there's also family members who live long distance that may or may not call, may or may not be supportive in other ways. And I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it's amazing how often it does, especially with my clients with severe clutter issues, whether that's from anxiety, depression, hoarding disorder, bipolar disorder, any sort of problem that makes it very difficult to use their executive functions. They can be very difficult to work with, and for a family member, more so. So anticipate the fact that these 4 stages can happen, and then be prepared moving forward to keep in that stage 1. It's important to keep your family together as a family more so than it is to argue about the stuff. Okay? So maybe you can't be in that house with mom anymore while she's trying to downsize because she drives you absolutely bonkers. That's perfectly fine. Don't be there. But take her out to dinner. Do something else that keeps the family together. When Scott and I, Scott's my husband for those of you who don't know, have been at loggerheads about things, we'll go to a movie. We'll go out to eat. We'll do something that reaffirms that connection between us as a couple outside of the stuff. Because you can handle anything as long as you have your relationships. So never put your stuff ahead of the people in your lives. They're the most important thing. Your house could burn down tomorrow. You could lose everything. Would it be devastating? Yes. Would you lose things that are important to you? Yes. Would you use things that are hard, if not impossible, to replace? Yes. You'll never get back those baby shoes from your children who are now in their 50s. Okay? But it's not as devastating as if your husband or your children were still in the house. So please keep in mind, people first. stuff second. I think Susie Orman says something along the lines, the people, money, things is how she puts it. But people do need to be first. So if you're working with someone and helping them declutter, whether it's a family member or a friend, stay in that stage 1. If you find that you're not, suggest taking a break and then go for a walk, go do something else, and then come back to it when you can be that positive influence again. So that's a long one today for our organizational tip, and it's, like I said, it's more of a concept than a tip. But there you go. So moving on. I thought it might be interesting if we use these lives in the second portion to make a quilt together. And how do I mean that? I mean that I would pick a quilt, and I'm going to have you vote on that. I'm going to give you until the December meeting to shoot me an email and tell me which of these options you would like to see. And then depending on what the vote is, that will determine what kind of a quilt it's going to be. And what I'm going to do is start at the very beginning with the concept and how I create the pattern from that in terms of the general pattern, not the specific yardage and all that part, but actually, how do I lay it out? How do I draw it? How do I think it through? And then we'll talk about, okay, then let's figure out fabric, and then let's figure out cutting, and then start the sewing. And then you're going to watch me mess up. And then how do we recover from being messed up? Because there's no quilt that comes out perfectly. Okay, let me just start with that. You are going to see that not all my points match. It's going to happen. On a full wall bed quilt, yeah, some of it's going to get messed up. Then the question is, what do you do about it? So then I'll either correct it, I may rip it, or I might say, can't see it from here, good enough. You never know. Okay, so that was what I was thinking. And so that way we'll have a little bit more structure to these after parts than what I've been doing, because I have been doing some sewing with you, but I've been doing things like working on the StashBlaster quilts and some other things, like this one behind me. I did most of this in front of you. But it wasn't the full soup to nuts part of it. So I thought it might be fun to do one of those. So this is what I had in mind. I'd like you to go to the website, and I'm going to see if this works. And I actually had somebody email me and say, you mention the website all the time, but you don't say it often enough. So it is StashBlasterQuilts.com. Right there. Yep. Okay, StashBlasterQuilts.com. And you can write to me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com. So I have 4 different options here. Let's see if I can get this so it's more in focus. Okay, so I can do a beginner quilt. Now, what's a beginner quilt? Basically squares, rectangles, something really simple like an Irish chain or a simple trip around the world or something along those lines. I can do a traditional but not exactly beginner. So maybe we'll be looking at some stars, or like I said, I don't have a plan yet. This is we'll pick a style and we'll go from there. But it could involve some stars. It could involve some curves. It could involve all kinds of stuff, but it would be a traditional style quilt. The third one is kind of an idea I've had kicking around in my head, and it's using orphan blocks in different ways. So I'm calling this the Wild 4 patch, is kind of what I'm thinking about, where we're going to take where we could take 4 patches and cut them wonky and then put them all together as a confetti kind of a look to it. So you could use old 4 patches that aren't necessarily squared up and aren't necessarily cut true or a specific size, and make them all fit and have them do something. Maybe get bigger as we go out, maybe make swirly I don't know. I thought it might be kind of fun to have them go from small to large, but maybe wave across the quilt. I don't know. Like I said, I've got some options. And then if that's what we choose to do, then I'll do another vote. Here's some different layouts. What do you think? and then we'll do whichever one you like. And then the last one is a 3D modern. I have the barest niggling of a mind back here, of an idea, where maybe we have like this three-dimensional thing where different quilt shapes are coming from the center and exploding out to the front, in maybe 4 of them. That's as far as the thought's gotten. So those are the 4. So I'd like you to go onto the website, or write to me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com and tell me which of the 4 you would like. Again, it's beginner, traditional, the 4-patch from Orphan Blocks, and the 3D modern. So let me know what you would like to do, and then majority rules. But I'm still going to be talking concepts that would apply to any quilt, but I thought it might be fun to have a long-term project that we could work on together. So I mentioned that I was going to ask you for your input, so that's what it is. And then at that point, I thought that I would point out, yes, I finished this top. This is the StashBlaster 1 variant, where we're using 6-inch raw strips here, and then I bordered them in a different color, so we'd have red, white, and blue. This week I also finished the green and white version, where instead of just having a riot of different colors, I picked one colorway. And so, here we go. So this is 4 times the size. This is using the StashBlaster 1 normal construction method. But just by doing one color, it does calm it down a little bit. Now, had I used sizzling pink, or cave fabrics, it might not be calmer, but it's still cohesive. So this one is now done, this top, and so I'll be able to start layering and quilting both quilts fairly soon. We had talked about what I was going to use as the backing. This is the one I decided on for the red, white, and blue quilt. And I thought it was kind of fun because it has quilt patterns on it. And so all I did was I seamed it up so that it's going to just be the 2 panels next to each other. This will easily fit. And then I will go ahead and be able to get that one ready to go soon too. I am debating on how I'm going to base this one. I often do the kitchen floor method, or I'll take it to my quilt guild. This was more pre-COVID, but we're starting to open back up to live here. Excuse me. For our sit and sews. So I'm thinking that maybe when I get back from from California, and from San Diego up through LA, we're going to kind of do that little piece of California. When I'm back from there and Thanksgiving is over, I might go to a sit and sew and baste it there. Or what I might do is load this onto the leaders for a long arm machine. Now I don't have a long arm machine, but there is a shop near here called the Quilter Studio where you can rent time on a machine. So if I preload onto those leaders, that will make life much better for me, because then it'll be much faster to attach, because you pin onto the leader and then you Velcro the leader on. So that's just a really quick thing. Zip, zap, zop. The backing is on, and that takes the longest. And then I would use a water-soluble thread and baste with that. And then I can come home and do it on my home machine when I have more time. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. But those are options. It's getting a little bit cool now to spray baste outside. And since I have multiple quilts to do, I think outside might be a little bit of a problem. Just because, the spray base, just because I wouldn't want to do it inside because I don't have the world's best ventilation where I have the space to do it. I could turn on my fan up here and open windows and put in a box fan and blow all the heat out into the cold. So I could get the ventilation, but I have very little space here to do it. So there's a couple of different things that come into play when it comes into spray-based. And it's cool enough out that I'm not sure the spray-based would work properly anyway. And I can't spray-based where my guild meets. So given all of those things, the only other method that I've considered was one that I was taught that I thought was really kind of fascinating. You take old scraps of fusible web and you use your rotary cutter and you make it minuscule, little teeny tiny shreds, and you sprinkle that on the quilt, and then you iron on the back of the quilt, and then you put your batting on, and then you iron through the batting to warm it up. I've also seen it where you put it on the batting and then you put the top on, but then I think the problem with that would be that you might not get all the way to the edges, or you'd wind up with a lot of this confetti in the batting, which if you hit it with the iron, then it's all over your iron. So I'm not really sure which way I would do it if I was going to do it that way. But then you put it then on the back of the batting, and then you lay the back on and you iron that. And so it acts kind of like a spray based in that you are using the fusible that way, but you don't get big sheets of it, so you don't get the heavy-handedness that you would get if you were just using full sheets of it, and it's a lot less expensive. So, because I guess you really just put just a few little tiny pieces, you know, every couple of inches. You don't have to use much. So I don't know. That's one that I've been thinking about, but I haven't tried it yet. Of course, this is the perfect quilt to try that with because it's a StashBlaster quilt. It's a charity quilt. It's the perfect time to try new techniques and new ideas and see how they work. And if you decide you don't like it, it's a charity quilt. It was always planned to be one. Doesn't matter. So that's what I'm thinking. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. You'll have to stay tuned and we'll figure it out together. But anyway, so I am debating as to exactly how I'm going to do that. This backing is a little bit older of a material, and it's a little bit heavier than your standard quilting cotton. So that also is going to come into play in terms of what the basting style is going to be. So that's where that stands. That's about it in terms of the past projects. So, you know, I do have a ton of them going. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to be doing with the petal, the flowers that I've done in I did in the past that I showed you. And I have the StashBlaster 2 and 3 and all of that already made. I just have to like do the patterns and get them up there for you. If this is your first time, on my website, right now only StashBlaster 1 is there, I know. I have made StashBlaster 2 and 3 and 4, but I haven't gotten the patterns made yet. But as soon as they are, any quilt that has StashBlaster in the name is a free download. You are welcome to use it. I would prefer that it be used for things like charity quilts, etc. They're designed to be able to be made quickly and even by groups. There's different instruction for guilds and things like that in terms of the prep, but they're all designed to be incredibly quick and to use up all the leftover bits and bobs and pieces and parts and all that stuff that we all have in a way to make space for new fabrics and to be able to have new projects. So they're supposed to be quick and they're supposed to be easy and they're supposed to be fun. That's the idea. I have other patterns that are out there that I've done that are more complex and are not StashBlasters. They're going to take some time, but they are available on my website as well. They're just not a StashBlaster, so they're not free. Okay, other than that, I'm going to go ahead and let me see. Last time we sewed some half square triangles, which was new for some. Let's talk about intentional orphans. And in the past, I've talked about how I have my leaders and enders box right over here on the right. And I will pre-prep things like 4 patches, half square triangles, things like that. So that if it's 3 o'clock in the morning like it was earlier in the week and I just couldn't sleep, actually it was 11:30 to 2:30 that I was sewing, sometimes I'll go downstairs and just try to fall asleep in front of the television, honestly. I put on the heating pad and I'm there and I'm good. But sometimes I need to get some sewing because the reason that I'm not sleeping is that my brain is just whirling and it's like a stick in a raging river. It's just kind of going everywhere and it's not letting me settle and to answer any of the problems I'm trying to solve. So for example, this last 2 weeks, I've been working either doubles or triples every day because I'm trying to get all of my clients seen and as far as I can before I leave on my trip. Of course, that also means that I'm booked up the second I get back, too. But I've been trying to get all this done. Well, when you're seeing 2 and 3 clients in a day, it's easy to have your brain at night when you're trying to sleep, trying to make sure that you did the right things with the right clients and you remember to make the right notes, that you didn't forget anything. And so it's just kind of swirling around in there. So at a time like that, sitting on watching TV isn't going to do it. Because I'm still going to have my brain going about the clients while I'm trying to watch Harry Potter or something. So I need to sew. I need something I can truly focus on instead of try to ignore like I would a television. I don't want to be doing something with handwork or something that's super important to make sure I get it right because my brain isn't 100% there. So I come here into my sewing room and I sew. Usually I raid my leaders and enders box because, like I said, I've pre-prepped those. So, for example, on the free table at my guild, I picked up these triangles. Okay? And so what I would do is I would match them up with a square that is the appropriate size for these triangles. So I could have 2 of them on the square, and I would sew them both down, cut the background square on the diagonal, so I'd have 2 half-square triangles. So that's a very common thing that I have just sitting around, is a bunch of stuff like this. But sometimes I'm all done. I've sewn everything. I'm caught up. I don't have a project that I dare work on without being partially brain dead, either because I'm trying to develop a new concept. And so if I mess it up, I might not catch it soon enough, and I'm going to go way too far before I realize it. Or it's the first time I'm doing something, and so I want to be truly intentional about it to make sure I haven't missed any steps when I'm writing it all down. Or for some other reason. I don't pick fabric when I'm tired, because I'm going to wind up with a magenta and a puce in the same quilt unintentionally. So I don't do that either. So it's very common that I will just come over to the other side of the room, and I'm going to actually leave you here for a second while I do this. Okay, I'm just walking over here. And I'm pulling a drawer out from behind you. I promise I won't hit you in the head as I go by. Okay, here I am, I'm back. So, as an example, this is a drawer that normally resides right there. And if you look at it, it says 2-inch blocks. So I have blocks and bricks and strips on that wall. Now, my squares here are all ones that I've cut. When did I cut them? In the processing phase. I've talked about the processing of fabric in the past. If you missed it, it wasn't clear, or it got edited down into an actual video and I didn't remember that part, let me know. Or if you want me to do it again, I can. But I will take things like this and say, okay, for patch time, I will just reach in, find 2 fabrics that I think would look okay together. So let's say these 2, okay? And I'll sew them together and be completely random. I have known people who say the only thing you can't sew together are 2 that are the same fabric, and just pull the next 2, even if you wouldn't normally put them together. I do try to do something that's either dark to medium, medium to light, or dark to light. So I do try to have a variety in value so that when I do put it into a quilt, it goes everywhere. I have in the past tried to have whites or whitish kind of colors, light creams, white on whites, that kind of stuff in 2 of the corners, and then have the same fabric in the opposite 2 corners so that it's a more regulated look. But sometimes not. Sometimes not. It just doesn't matter. So why would I make 4 patches without a plan? Because there's so many quilts that can use them. And if worse came to worse, you can put them together and make a separate quilt all on their own. Nothing wrong with that. I like the light dark because that gives me more options. But there's no reason why you couldn't sew, let's say, these 2 together. So I've got a dark green and a dark blue. You certainly can. I wouldn't, but you can. And there will be a spot for that 4 patch in a quilt someday, sooner or later. So that's a way of making intentional orphans. Now there are a few blocks I do that with, and I've talked about this before. 4 patches are one of them. Half square triangles are another. I have an entire file box that's just half square triangles. I do flying geese because as long as the top line on your flying goose, and you've got your point like this, is your 1/4 inch, you can trim it down from whatever size you started. Let's say you started at a 12.5 inch size goose. You can trim it down all the way till you get to this teeny tiny little 1/2 inch flying goose. Not the smartest of ways to use the fabric, but if it's the right one, you do what you want to do. And what's the worst that'll happen? Depending on how you cut it, you'll have half square triangles sitting there ready to go with 2 cuts. So it's still not a waste. But as long as that top line works, you can trim it to any size. The ones that look like a mountain, so it's a 45-degree angle with wings, so that it's a isosceles or equilateral. I don't remember if it's an equilateral or isosceles triangle. I'm sorry about that. I kind of feel like an idiot at the moment. That's okay. Everybody's allowed. Those can be trimmed down. The ones that shoot from the corner like this and then square off up here, those can be trimmed down. Any block that you can trim down without changing the block shape is a perfect one to build a small stock of by making intentional orphans. Now, a lot of the times what I'll do is if I'm doing, let's say that one, the triangle in the middle, I'm trying to get for some reason I'm cockeyed here. So if there's this triangle in the middle, here we go. These wing pieces are an odd shape. And so depending on the method of construction you use, you will sometimes wind up in the trimming process getting more, usually smaller, triangles that come off. So one of the things that I will do is I'll save those, and I'll either put those together as rectangles, so that they've got the diagonal on the rectangle, or I will save them and make more of those same triangular blocks, but I'll do a smaller size. But when I'm cutting that central triangle, I'm going to get more of those wings. So it's just one of those things where you just keep, you may be starting off with a 6-inch block, and then every time you make it, they get smaller until it's too small to bother with. In which case, then it goes in an improv block, or it goes on the back of the quilt as just part of the back of the quilt, or it stays at whatever size it is as an orphan, it turns into a rectangle, or you do whatever it is you want to do with it. So there's lots and lots of choices. People have asked me why I work so small. For many people, a 2-inch block is too small, and I work in 1 inches, and I work in some things that are smaller than 1 inch. And why do I do that? Well, for one reason, well, it could just be that I'm cheap. I'll admit that. I don't spend money I don't have to. Quilting fabric is not cheap. And will I splurge? You betcha. But I also know that I could go overboard. And I want to make as much use as possible out of the material that I have. Because if I buy a yard of fabric and only use half of it, and I throw the rest, and it could be because I did a fussy cut and I've got holes all over it, but I only used half of it. I look at that and say, okay, if I paid $10 a yard for the fabric, it cost me the same amount, but I only used half the fabric and I tossed the rest. It's like it cost me $20 for it. I know that's not exactly true, but I've wasted some of that money. So that quilt is actually going to cost me a lot more if that's the only use I get out of that material. Okay, I hope that makes sense. The idea being you're paying per square inch. So if you only use part of it and you're throwing away the rest, you're throwing away that money. So I really like to do that. I like to use it because I'm a penny pincher in some ways. But that has allowed me to live the life that I live even when my husband and I have both been unemployed. Because we save and we do what we can. Secondly, I don't see any reason for it to hit the landfill if I can avoid it. I think that there's already way too much stuff that gets thrown away. I was in a house the other day that had a flooding problem, and sadly, the owners had to throw out everything in the basement because everything is moldy. And there was so much of it. It wasn't something where we could clean enough of it to make it worthwhile. But there were thousands of rubber stamps. There was fabric galore. There was quilting type rulers. There were baking things. There were all kinds of different things in that basement. A lot of it still brand new that had to get thrown away. And I came home and my heart hurt because we wound up taking more than 6 big hauling truck type dumper loads out of that basement. And so it was probably $50,000 worth of stuff. And not only were they out the money, but they had to pay to have the people haul it out. And it was all just going to have to go to the dump. And I'm looking at that and I'm just like, if I can, anything I can avoid taking to the dump, I do. So, unfortunately, because of the flooding that they had and the fact that they needed plumbing work done and things like that, there was just no time. We could not do that at a slower pace. So, out it went. And so, by using the smaller pieces, as small as I do, I'm avoiding sending it to the landfill as well. I also figure if I can do it in 2 inches, there's no reason I can't do it with 4 or 6 or 8. As long as you know how to upsize your patterns, whatever you've got, you can do it in that size. There's nothing wrong with that. Just means you have to cut your pieces a different size or go to your stash and pull it out in that size and alter your pattern a little bit. If you want to know how to do that, I can do that. There's also a really good tutorial by Megan of Tiny Orchard Quilts. One of her videos is on how to upsize a pattern, how to alter a pattern. So, you know, like I said, we can do this here. You can watch her there. But it's not that hard. A lot of people are scared to change pattern sizes. The big thing is making sure you get it all and you double check your math. But the math isn't hard. So let's keep all of that in mind too. And we're going to be doing a lot of that math when we do that quilt together that I was talking about. So that's another reason why I thought it would be good to do that as a project. Anyway, so by working small, I can do that. And also, if I have a quilt in 2-inch blocks, that's, let's say, 30 inches square, and I make it out of 4-inch blocks, I'm going to have a 60-inch square, you know. So it's easier for me to have a lot of smaller quilts for the storage, because I do a lot of teaching. I want to have samples. I want to have a bunch of samples. I want to show different colorways. I want to show different methods and ideas. But the more of those that you want to carry, the more quilts you're carrying, the heavier they get. And it just gets to a point where you have to winnow down how much you can take, so there's fewer things that you can show. So another thing that I'm thinking about doing is just stay stitching the ends of the tops and only using tops for my teaching. So instead of actually turning this into the full quilt, if I wanted to use this for teaching, I would just take the top. So that's yet another thing. So by having that economy of scale, I can store more samples and more quilts in less space, which is important when you have a tiny little space like I do. I know, tiny little. It's 15 feet long. Yes, it is. But I have very little space in this direction. So I have my sewing table, which is less than 2 feet deep, and I've got my sewing machine on it, but I also have the monitor, and I have, you know, swing arms and stuff for everything. So my space here is pretty limited, and then in order to be able to walk anywhere, I kind of have to sidestep on the far side of the desk here, and then over here there's just room for my chair to where I don't bang into my my sewing table platform here to get in and out. So not a lot of space for storage and everything. Plus I have tons of fabric. So added it all together. That's the reason that I work small. So we're almost out of time. We have 8 minutes left, so I'm not going to do any sewing today. But I do want to go back over your choices for the quilt to work on, and I will attempt while I'm gone to try to figure out about how long it should take. And so if you want to do this with me, then the 3D Modern would be the most difficult. You would need to sign up with me so I could send you the pattern if you wanted to do it as a true sew along with me. But the other ones you should be able to do fairly simply on your side as well, if you'd like to sew with me as we go. So again, here's my beautiful marketable product. Yes, I know I should have something better. Okay, so I'm gonna put my glasses on to make sure that it's not blurry. Okay, so you could go to StashBlasterQuilts.com or email me at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com, and your choices are beginner, that's the one that's going to be squares or rectangles, something simple. Traditional, which is going to be a very well-known quilt pattern. The final quilt won't be, because we're going to design it ourselves, but the blocks will be very traditional. The wild 4-patch using orphaned 4-patches, and then last is the 3D Modern. And that's the zoomy one that I was talking about. So those are our options. Now, when you make your selection, please only vote once. I have so far had 1 vote for the 3D Modern and 1 vote for the orphans in the 4-patch. So that's where we are right now. So please feel free whenever it is you get to see this. It is, just as a point of reference, this is the first Wednesday of the month of November in 2021. So if you're watching this, 2 years from now, you've missed your window. But I will probably, if this is something that people enjoy, this may be something that we keep doing, and we might try a whole bunch of different things while we do this. If you would prefer, you can also say that you would like to do a block instead of a quilt, with the idea that maybe you could take that block and just repeat it and make your own quilt out of it. But I don't want to limit where we are right now, other than to say, okay, let's do this as a quilt, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll do something else, and you'll let me know. But this is what I thought might be fun. So, beginner, traditional, 4-patch, orphan block quilt, and the 3D modern. Again, I will be missing next month, so please, not next month, next time, the one in 2 weeks. If you have enjoyed today, and if you want to participate in this, or even if you don't, but if you've enjoyed yourself today, please click subscribe, and if you hit the little bell, then it will let you know when I go live or when I post something. And then also, if you like it, it will help bump us up in the algorithm so that hopefully more people will find us. And I'd really love to have that happen, because I'd like to be seeing a lot of chat information coming in with ideas or suggestions, or people being able to post photos maybe to the website so that then I can put those in and show those as they happen. Kind of like a quilt along. I am working on something like that for us in the future, but that's going to be a little bit ways down the road, when we can do memberships, because that's something where that's going to be a very extended thing that I'm thinking about. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, thank you so much for being here today. And I hope that we will see you again the first Wednesday of the month of December. And I will tell you all about my trip. I will try to remember to take photos. I'm not a real big photo gal, but I will hopefully take photos and be able to put together a little bit of a slideshow and show you about my trip to California. So take care, everyone, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye. Let's get sewing.